Hi everyone, we're reading chapter 23 of Toro Moon by Darby Karsha. And guess what? My mom's back again. Here she is.
Hey guys, it's Chris's mom, Mrs. Gimmelstein. I'm excited to be back reading chapter 23 of Toro Moon. Let's get started. The rest of the day, I watched myself from a distance. I walked around, said words. I think I ate something, but it wasn't really me. The real me was still kneeling in the morning grass, shivering, as I waited for my best friend to come back. Guilt. So much guilt. I marveled that my spine didn't snap from its weight. Roman's words kept clanging around in my head. Remember, Mateo del Toro, the comfort and well-being of our war brothers and sisters comes first. The fact that we ride upon them does not mean they are beneath us. No, they eat before us. They rest before us. Everything for them first. Sitting in the shade of the porch's top step, I propped my forehead on my knees and stared at the wooden tread between my sneakers. My mace lay beside me. I couldn't stop carrying it around. Maybe I was hoping for an opportunity to use it on myself. Through the screen, I heard Dad talking with Roman on the phone. He paused and said something to Ben, who answered back. Then the screen door whined. A moment later, my brother sat down next to me. Hey, he bumped me with a shoulder. Want to go into town with me? He jingled the truck keys in his hand. Get a soda or something? I shook my head. It hurt to talk. I had cried. Hard. So hard. By the time I had finished with the first round of grief, Dad's shirt was damp with snot and slobber and tears. Not all of the tears were mine. Ben nodded. He tucked the keys into his pocket. The screen squealed again. Roman and Kathleen are on their way, Dad said. Vasco is coming with them to help us hunt down the rest of the pack. They will stay as long as we need them. Matt? Yeah, I know. Change the sheets on both my beds. My room was the automatic guest quarters since I had a pair of twin beds, which meant I ended up on a sleeping bag on the floor of Ben's room. Not that it mattered. Nothing really mattered anymore. What about their ranch? Ben asked. Josephina can manage things. Kathleen pointed out it will be good practice for her, as she will be the one who will take over Rancho de Navarre eventually. I wanted to clap my hands over my ears. Shut up! I screamed inside my head. Who cares? Who gives a rip about hunting down more Skinners or managing a ranch or clean sheets? Nothing will ever fix what I did. And what I did was let LC die. I left him alone in the barn. Didn't take one lousy minute to examine him for bite marks, even though he'd been limping. I squeezed my eyelids tight as guilt and sorrow racked me again. Scoot over. Dad wedged himself between us. I opened my eyes. We sat there in silence, shoulders touching. My brain revolved in a sluggish circle. For a moment I wondered where Turk and Izzy were. Then I remembered. They were standing vigil over El Cid until the Navarres arrived. My father and brother had spent most of the morning digging a hole. I spent most of the morning with my head buried under a pillow. Even though they worked at the far edge of the field, I couldn't stand to hear the shovels tearing up the grass or the thud of clods falling to the earth. Dad cleared his throat. Ben, do you recall when you were 5 and Matt had just learned to walk? Oh, you were so frustrated because he could not keep up with you. So one day, you decided to take matters into your own hands. You snuck away from both your mother and me and dragged your baby brother to the barn. Yeah, I kind of remember that. There, you looped Elsid's tail through one of the straps of your brother's overalls and then ordered the stallion to teach Matt how to walk faster. Ben chuckled. I remember pitching a fit because the old guy just stood there. Dad pulled something out of his shirt pocket and held it out. A photo. I couldn't help leaning forward for a closer look. How could a heart keep breaking into pieces if it was already dust? In the picture, El Cid stood sideways to the camera in front of the barn. His coat was a darker gray than I had ever seen. Head lowered, he peered into the face of a furious Ben, who glared up at him with his chin thrust out and fists on his hips. And there I was, a toddler, in a pair of denim overalls, tied to the stallion's tail like a dog on a leash, and beaming. Total goofball. As soon as your mother saw you three, she ran back inside for the camera. You know, Ben sniffed and then wiped his nose on his sleeve. A normal mother would have freaked. Dad laughed softly. Normal is not in our family's vocabulary. I didn't say anything, but it helped just sitting there. By the time Roman and Kathleen arrived, I felt, well, not better, not even close to better, just numb. Even before Roman eased the rig to a stop, Kathleen jumped out of the cab. Without a word, she hugged Dad, then Ben, and then she turned to me. Before I made a run for it, she pulled me close, and for a long minute she held me. I tried not to tremble. Another failure. It's okay to cry, Matt. It's okay to be sad. She stepped back and laid her hands on my shoulders, eyes locked on mine. But I promise you, you won't be sad forever. I chomped down on my lip, tasting blood. Why should I believe you? I wanted to yell in her face. You said he'd live for another 10 years and maybe more. I bit harder. It wasn't her fault. And anyway, words weren't doing it for me. So I just nodded and stepped away, playing with the leather loop on the end of the mace's haft. Roman was gripping Dad's arm while my father stared off at the mountains, jaw clenched. Guess words weren't working for him either. After a long minute, he took a deep breath and then gave a nod. Without a word, he and Roman walked around to the trailer, unlatched the door, and swung it open. Thank you, Roman, a deep voice boomed. The trailer rocked from side to side. An enormous horse, a dappled iron gray with charcoal black mane and tail, backed out. He dipped his head at Dad. Javier? Vasco. I'm sorry for your loss and count it as mine as well, Vasco sighed. He was a gifted fighter and a great-hearted friend. The stallion's eyes were sad behind a black forelock that hung almost to his nostrils. The trailer swayed again. A brown leg with black stockings that reached to the knees appeared. Another horse, a bay stallion, stepped out. The afternoon sun dusted his brown coat, the color of fine mahogany, with gold. It gleamed as he shifted from foot to foot. He shook his head, sending his black mane flying. My heart clenched when I noticed he was about the same height as El Cid, but with a more wiry build. This is Rodrigo. Vasco pointed his nose at the younger stallion. He's been staying with us for a few months. He offered to come along and help on the hunt. Call me Rigo, the bay flexed his neck. Vasco told me about El Cid on our way here. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to know him. He glanced around. Any place to get a drink? Barrel by the door. Ben pointed his chin at the barn. And there's a field to the east if you want to stretch your legs. It was so much like the day Izzy arrived. I almost laughed. And then it hit me. A fist to the gut that knocked the amusement and the wind right out of me. I staggered back a step. I don't freaking believe it. Rigo wasn't here to help hunt. He was here to replace El Cid. How could Dad do that? To me? To El Cid? Confusion and betrayal and fury welled up in my chest like a bubble of lava. I prayed it would spew out and set everyone on fire. Serve them right. Dad must have seen my rage, for he started toward me, one hand outstretched. No, my son, it's not like that. I bolted out of the yard and flew along the road, the thump of my sneakers drowning out my father's pleas to come back. I reached the base of the hump and slowed. A stitch burned in my left side. Panting, I started I started up the slope, using my mace like a cane. I marveled that I still carried the weapon. Guess old habits never died, unlike family members. I clambered up the rocky slope using my hands and feet, pushing myself harder and harder with each step, punishing myself. Reaching the top, I bent over my knees, gasping until my lungs stopped burning. Face turned away from home, I started down the hump's north side. It helped to just walk and think about nothing but the next footfall. When I hit the bottom, the toes of my sneakers pointed eastward for Hufano. Fine with me. I was just along for the ride. Ride. Riding. El Cid's white mane flowing over my hands. I was forever getting the reins tangled in the thick, wiry hairs. The world blurred. Blinking hard, I stopped and scrubbed my face and then looked around. In the distance, I could see the Field Museum sign by the side of the new road. Beyond was the gate. Another tidal wave of guilt and rage slammed into me. I looked down at the mace in my hands. I could do it. I could march through the gate and into the maze and kill every single Skinner. What if they kill you first? An annoying voice in my head asked. So what if they do? I answered back. The 1-2-3 drumbeat of galloping hooves behind me. I sighed. Probably my father on Turk. The hoofbeat slowed and then stopped. I kept my back turned and eyes closed, not wanting to see the matching sorrow in his face. A long silence. Only the soft breathing of a horse. I broke first. I know what you're going to say, Dad. Wrong guy. Hey, heck, wrong species. I spun around. Rigo stood there, head cocked and his forelock covering one eye. He studied me with the other. What do you want? Rude as all get out. I didn't care. Just checking on you. Mission accomplished. Now go away. His ears twitched at my tone. Anything I can do for you, Matt? Reverse time? Wish I could, he said quietly. Then you're not much good to me. Even as I said it, I winced, but I couldn't bring myself to take it back. For a split second, I saw why Turk was the way he was. It was kind of fun to hurt others when you yourself were hurting. He hesitated and then spoke. Well, I could be. Of use to you, I mean. I've got 2 years of experience under my cinch dealing with all kinds of monsters. I did the math. Since Aldushans started hunting at 3 years old, that meant the young stallion was 5. I spent 1 whole year down in Arizona helping the Montoyas when their coffer broke open. 1 vicious infestation of sand demons, and then another 8 months over in Utah doing fire drake search and destroy with the Reyes clan. And for the last month, I hunted duende on the Navarre ranch, trading off with Vasco. Those stinkers, and I do mean stinkers, aren't much harder to hunt than Skinners, from what Roman told me. What, he's applying for a job? A weak curiosity stirred awake inside of me. Don't you have a home? A family? He lifted a shoulder. I like to move around. My curiosity went back to sleep. Well, you can move around back to the barn. I want to be alone. Sorry, not an option. Javier asked me to hang out with you while they, you know. I frowned. While they what? Had the ceremony. Without me? My voice broke with disbelief. Your dad thought it'd be easier on you if they. No! I sprinted past Rigo and bolted for home, my mace await when I needed speed. Tears of rage stung my eyes. Rigo trotted up beside me. I can get you back, he said, in like 3 minutes. I don't want your help. Fine, I snapped. I stopped and grabbed his mane with my free hand, bent my knees, and jumped. With a grunt, I landed on my stomach and then swung my leg around. He took off with a powerful thrust of his hindquarters. We dashed through the yard, around the barn, and across the field. My throat tightened at the sight of a mound of bare earth. Way to go, loser. You managed to let El Cid down again. Rigo slowed and then halted. I slid off. My knees buckled. Only my hands, still tangled in the bay's mane, kept me upright. Ordering my legs to man up, I wobbled over and joined the circle around the mound, squeezing in between Dad and Ben. The only sound was the wind in the grass, whispering a requiem. I was suddenly and fiercely and gratefully relieved I missed the part where they slid El Cid's body into the ground, because that would have been the last memory I had of him, and I would have hated that. He would have hated that. And that's the end of chapter 23. Tomorrow we'll begin chapter 24. Thanks, guys, for letting me be a part of this. Have a great one.